My name is Daliana Murray, and I need you to hear this story. Not because I want your pity, not because I am looking for anyone to feel sorry for me, but because what happened to me on a quiet Tuesday morning in Sacramento, California, taught me something that I wish someone had told me a long time ago. That the people who love you the most are not always the people who share your last name. I want to start at the moment everything changed. I want to start right there, at the worst part, because I need you to feel exactly what I felt. Then I am going to take you back to the beginning, and I promise you, by the time I am done, you will understand every single decision I made. It was a Tuesday in early June. The California sky outside my kitchen window was that deep, impossible blue. The kind of blue that makes you feel like the world is full of good things. I was sitting at my kitchen table in my old house robe, the green one with the fraying cuffs that I keep meaning to throw away. I had a cup of chamomile tea. I had the morning news on low in the background. I was 2 days away from the biggest trip of my life, and my heart was full. Then my phone buzzed on the table. I looked down and saw my son's name light up the screen. Juman. I smiled before I even picked it up. I figured he was checking in about the flight time, or maybe asking if I needed a ride to the airport. I picked up the phone, took a small sip of my tea, and I opened the message. What I read next made my hand go completely, absolutely still. The message said, and I am telling you these exact words because they are burned into my memory and I do not believe they will ever leave. Hey Mom, so there's been a change of plans. Rashanique wants to keep this vacation just for her family. You won't be joining us? You've already done your part. Thanks. I read it once. I read it again. I read it a third time because I was certain I had misunderstood something. Certain there was a word I had missed, or a tone I had gotten wrong. There was no word I had missed. There was no tone I had gotten wrong. You've already done your part. I sat at that kitchen table, in my house robe, with my tea going cold in my hand, staring at a phone screen that had just told me I was no longer welcome on a trip that I had spent 3 full years saving over $21,000 to fund. A vacation I had planned from scratch. A vacation where I had booked the flights, reserved the beach villa on Maui, arranged the car rentals, confirmed every single detail twice, and tied every payment directly to my own travel fund account. And my son, my only child, the boy I raised and loved and sacrificed for, had sent me 11 words that reduced me to nothing more than a wallet they were finished using. My eyes started to burn. My chest tightened up like someone had wrapped a fist around my heart and squeezed. But something else happened at the same time. Something quiet and fierce and very calm began to move inside me, rising up slow and steady the way water rises when you turn on a tap. I looked down at that phone. I looked at those words, and I thought, very clearly, very deliberately, all right, Daliana, all right. But before I tell you what I did, you need to know who I am. Because none of this makes sense without the beginning. I grew up in Fresno, California, the daughter of a school teacher and a mechanic. We were not wealthy people, but we were a giving family. My mother used to say, Daliana, whatever you have, you give some of it away, because the day will come when you will need someone to give to you. I carried that all my life. I carried it into every relationship, every friendship, every room I ever walked into. I met Gerald Murray when I was 26 years old, at a church social in Fresno on a warm August evening. He was a tall, quiet man with big, gentle hands and the kind of eyes that looked right at you when you talked, like nothing else in the room mattered. We married 2 years later in a small ceremony with 30 people and a cake I baked myself, and we built a life together that was not glamorous but was full of laughter and hard work and Sunday mornings and the kind of love that holds you steady when everything else is shaking. We had one son, Juman, and Juman was the light of both our lives. Gerald worked in logistics management for most of his career. I worked part-time, first as a teacher's aide, and later helping elderly neighbors in our community with their errands, their appointments, their grocery runs, their paperwork. It was not work that made us rich, but it was work that made me feel useful, needed, like I was putting something good into the world every single day. We had a dream, Gerald and I. We talked about it for years. Hawaii, Maui, specifically the road to Hana, the black sand beaches, the waterfalls tucked into the mountains like secrets. We had a glass jar on the kitchen counter that Gerald had labeled in his own handwriting. It said, Hawaii Fund. Every week he would put something in it. Sometimes $5, sometimes $20, sometimes just a handful of coins from his pocket. He used to wink at me and say, Daliana, one day we are going to stand on that beach together and watch the sun go down over the Pacific. And it is going to be the most beautiful thing either of us has ever seen. Gerald Murray died of a heart attack on a cold December morning 6 years ago. He was 58 years old. He never got to see Hawaii. The grief that followed was unlike anything I can describe to a person who has not lived through it. It was not just sadness. It was like someone had taken the furniture out of every room in my life and left me standing in an empty house, not knowing which direction to walk. There were mornings I could not get out of bed. There were afternoons I sat in Gerald's armchair just to smell the faint trace of him that still lived in the fabric. I took the Hawaii Fun jar off the counter the week after the funeral because looking at it felt like staring directly into a wound. But grief, when you let it move through you instead of staying stuck in it, has a way of becoming something else. About 8 months after Gerald passed, I went back to that box where I had packed the jar away. I took it out. I held it in both hands for a long while, and then I made a decision. I was going to finish what Gerald started. I opened a dedicated travel fund account at my bank, completely separate from my everyday money. And every single month, I put something in it. When I earned a little extra from my community work, more went in. When I got a small settlement from a fender bender, it went in. When I skipped buying myself birthday gifts or new clothes I didn't strictly need, the difference went in. I watched that number grow with the slow, patient joy of someone tending a garden. Month after month, year after year. By the time 3 years had gone by, I had $21,462 sitting in that account. I called it, in my heart, my love letter to Gerald. Now, I had friends who kept telling me to take that money and go. My dear friend Zorana Lee, who I have known since our 30s, kept saying, Daliana, you do not need to take anybody, you just go. My friend Shaylin Russell, who is one of the sharpest and most generous women I have ever met, said something similar. Phoenicia Morton and Karen Wheeler, 2 women who had been in my corner through some of the darkest seasons of my life, told me the same thing over and over. Just go, Daliana. Go and enjoy it. But I kept thinking about family. I kept thinking about Juman. I thought about Gerald watching from wherever he was, watching his wife and his son stand on that Hawaiian beach together, watching us carry his memory to the place he always wanted to reach. I thought it would be the most beautiful thing I could do for his name. So I told Juman. I told him I had saved the money, and I wanted to take us all to Maui in the summer. And I will tell you, the look on my son's face in that moment, that is something I will hold on to forever, even now. He hugged me. He held me tight in a way he had not done since he was a little boy. He said, Mama, this is incredible. Dad would have loved this. And I cried right there in his kitchen because it felt like healing. What I did not expect was how quickly things began to shift. Rashanique Lawson, Juman's wife, had never been a warm woman with me. She was polite in the way people are polite when they have decided you are not important enough to be rude to. She never asked how I was. She accepted my cooking and my gifts and my presence at her table, without ever really seeing me. I told myself it was just her personality. I told myself she showed love differently. I gave her every benefit of every doubt because she was my son's wife and because that is the kind of woman I am. But as soon as the Hawaii plans became real, Rashanique's behavior changed. Quietly, carefully, the way a tide comes in before a storm, her family started appearing on the guest list. First it was her father, a man named Neville Watkins, who I had met exactly 3 times and who had never once acknowledged me warmly. Then came her half-brother Tarek Kelly, then another half-brother named Kyman Starks, then a cousin, Desharius Williamson, who seemed to materialize whenever there was something free to enjoy. Every single one of them added to my tab. Every single one of them paid for by my $21,000. My love letter to Gerald. I noticed. Oh, I noticed. But I swallowed it because I believed in generosity. I believed in family. I kept packing my suitcase and reading travel guides about Maui and labeling my bags and laying my passport on the corner of my dresser where I could see it every morning when I woke up. 2 days before we were supposed to fly out, on a bright June Tuesday, I sat down at my kitchen table with my chamomile tea and my morning news, and my phone buzzed. Juman, you won't be joining us. You've already done your part. I put the phone down. I did not cry. I sat in the silence of that kitchen for a long time. The kind of silence that has weight to it. The kind that presses on your shoulders and asks you what you are made of. And then, slow and steady, I stood up. I walked to the small desk in the corner of the living room. The desk where Gerald used to sit on Sunday evenings to pay our bills. I opened my laptop. I pulled up my banking portal with hands that were not shaking. I want you to understand that clearly. My hands were not shaking at all. I found the travel fund account. $21,462. Every skipped dinner, every unwrapped birthday gift, every piece of Gerald I had been carefully carrying forward for 3 years. I moved my cursor across the screen. There was a button I had never touched before. Small, gray, a tiny lock icon beside it. Freeze account. My finger hovered over the mouse. The cursor sat right there on that button like it was waiting for me, like it had always been waiting. Outside my window, the California sky was still that deep, beautiful blue. Inside, I was the quietest I had ever been in my life. And I clicked it. The cursor clicked, the screen refreshed, and just like that, $21,462 went quiet behind a digital lock that only I could open. I sat back in Gerald's chair and looked at the screen for a moment. There was a small confirmation message in a gray box that said the account had been successfully frozen and that no transactions could be processed until the account holder, me, Daliana Murray, personally authorized the lift. I read those words twice. Then I closed the laptop gently, the same way you close a book after the last page, and I sat in the silence of that living room. I want you to understand something about that moment. I was not angry. I know that might be hard to believe. I know most people would expect a mother in my position to be screaming into a pillow or calling her son back with a voice full of fire. But anger was not what I felt. What I felt was something much more grown than anger. It was clarity. The kind of clear-eyed, steady knowing that only comes to a person when they have finally stopped pretending that something is fine when it is not. I had been pretending for a long time. That was over now. I got up from that desk, walked back to the kitchen, and poured my cold chamomile tea down the sink. I made a fresh cup. I sat back down at that kitchen table and I let myself think. Not frantically, not with a racing heart, but slowly and deliberately. The way Gerald used to think through a problem, piece by piece, step by step. I thought about the flights, booked through an online travel portal, all charged to my frozen account. I thought about the beach villa on Maui, 8 beds, ocean view, 2 weeks, a significant deposit already paid. I thought about the car rentals, the excursion bookings, the dinner reservations I had made at 2 restaurants along the coast. Every single one of those reservations had one thing in common. Every single one of them was linked to an account that could no longer process a single penny. I thought about Juman and Rashanique and Neville Watkins and Tarek Kelly and Kyman Starks and Desharius Williamson, all of them packing their bags right now, probably laughing, probably excited, probably feeling very pleased with how smoothly things had gone. And I thought, quietly, to myself, they do not know yet. That thought did something unexpected. It did not make me feel cruel or vindictive. It made me feel something almost like peace, because I had spent so many years being the one who was kept in the dark, the one who was smiled at while being used, the one who was thanked warmly right up until she was no longer needed. For once, the surprise was not mine. I did not call Juman back that day. I did not send a single text. I did not argue, explain, or beg. I simply lived my Tuesday like a woman who had made a decision and intended to stand by it. I watered my plants. I called my neighbor to see how her hip was healing after her surgery. I watched the evening news. I went to bed at a reasonable hour. And I slept. I want you to hear this. I slept better than I had in months. The next day was Wednesday, one day before the scheduled departure. My phone buzzed a few times with a follow-up text from Juman asking if I had seen his message. I read it. I set the phone face down on the counter. He sent another one in the evening that said they were all set and heading to the airport hotel to be close for the early morning flight. I read that one too. I set the phone face down again. That evening, I sat in Gerald's chair with a cup of tea, and I did something I had not done in a while. I talked to him, out loud in that quiet house, with the lamp on low and the night pressing soft against the windows. I said, Gerald, I know you believed in doing right by people. I know you believed in being generous. I believe in those things too, but I do not think this is what you meant. I do not think you ever meant for your love to be somebody else's free ride. I paused. Then I said, I think I know what to do with what we saved, and I think you would be proud of it. I believe I felt him agree with me. That is all I will say about that. Thursday morning came before the sun was fully up, the departure day. I made coffee instead of tea that morning. I stood at my kitchen window and watched the sky turn from dark blue to gray to the first pale gold of early morning. Somewhere across Sacramento, a group of people were checking out of an airport hotel, loading their luggage into a car, talking over each other with the loud, careless excitement of people who believe everything has been handled. They arrived at the airport just after 5 in the morning. I know the details because Juman told me later, in one of the many panicked messages I would eventually receive. He told me they had all gotten through security just fine. He told me they had found the gate, gotten in line, and everything had felt completely normal. Rashanique was in good spirits. Neville Watkins had complained about the early hour but was there. Tarek Kelly had a carry-on bag that was too big and had to check it at the gate. Kyman Starks and Desharius Williamson were both half asleep, leaning against the wall near the boarding area. The gate agent announced boarding for their zone. Juman stepped up. He pulled out his phone to show the digital ticket. The agent scanned it. The machine beeped once. A short, flat sound. The agent frowned, looked at the screen, and tried again. Another flat beep. She looked up at my son and said, calmly and professionally, that the booking appeared to have been canceled or was showing an invalid payment status, and that she was unable to board him at this time. Juman told me later that he laughed at first. He actually laughed. He thought it was a glitch. He stepped aside, opened his travel app, and tried to pull up the confirmation. What he found instead was a notice, clean and simple and impossible to misread, that all reservations under the associated payment account had been flagged as frozen, and the bookings had been automatically voided, according to the payment terms he had agreed, to when the trip was booked. All of them. Every seat on that flight, every room in that beach villa, every rental car, every excursion, every dinner reservation along the Maui coast. Gone. Not delayed, not on hold. Gone. It took about 90 seconds for the reality to move through the group like a cold wave. Rashanique checked her phone. Neville Watkins checked his. Tarek Kelly, who had just checked his oversized bag, started asking questions in a loud voice. Kyman Starks woke up fast. Desharius Williamson looked from face to face trying to understand what was happening, and Juman stood in the middle of all of it, in an airport terminal at 5 in the morning, and he called me. My phone lit up on my kitchen counter. I looked at it. I watched his name glow on the screen. I let it ring. He called again. I let it ring again. Then the texts started coming, and I want you to know that I read every single one of them. The first few were questions. Mom, what happened to the booking? Mom, our cards aren't working. Mom, can you call the bank? Then they became explanations. Mom, I think there was a miscommunication. Rashanique didn't mean it like that. Mom, she just wanted some space. She didn't mean you couldn't come. Mom, we can work this out. Just unfreeze the account. Then they became something closer to pleading. Mom, please, we are stuck at the airport. Everyone is here. Please just call the bank, please. I read them all. I set the phone face down, and I felt something in my chest that I can only describe as the quiet closing of a door. Not a slam, not a bang, just a firm and gentle click. I was done arguing. I was done explaining. And I was not going to unfreeze a single dollar. Instead, I picked up the phone, navigated back to the banking portal, and began the process of canceling the reservations myself and filing for the refunds that the booking policies entitled me to. Because I had been careful when I planned that trip. Very careful. The way people are careful when they have worked 3 years for something, and I had selected refundable options across nearly every booking, exactly the kind that protect you when life does not go the way you planned. The airline gave me a travel credit. The villa returned the deposit. The car rental refunded in full. The excursion companies each issued credits or cash returns within 48 hours. Over the next several days, the money came back. Piece by piece, it came home. And the whole time, I was quiet. I did not answer Juman's calls. I did not respond to his texts. I was not being cruel. I want to be clear about that. I was not trying to punish him endlessly or make him suffer for sport. I was simply a woman who had been dismissed in 11 words after 3 years of love and sacrifice, and I no longer had anything urgent to say. When I was ready to speak, I would speak, but that time had not come yet. What had come, instead, was an idea. On a Thursday evening, 2 days after the trip was supposed to begin, I sat down with my phone and called Zorana Lee first. Zorana, who had been telling me for over a year to stop pouring myself out for people who did not see me. I said, Zorana, are you free in 2 weeks? She said, Daliana, for what? I said, Hawaii. There was a silence, and then she laughed. A big, warm, full laugh. And she said, Girl, you better not be playing with me. I called Shaylin Russell next. Shaylin, who had sat with me in the hospital the night Gerald died, and held my hand without saying a word because she knew there were no right words. I said, Shaylin, I need you to come somewhere with me. She said, Where? I said, Maui. She went so quiet I thought the call had dropped. Then she said, softly, Oh, Daliana. Yes, yes. I called Phoenicia Morton, who I have known since we were both young mothers pushing strollers around the same park in Fresno, and I called Karan Wheeler, who is one of the funniest and most fiercely loyal people I have ever been given the gift of knowing. They both said yes before I had finished explaining. I booked 5 tickets to Maui with my travel credits and refunded savings. I found a beautiful house near the water. Not the 8-person villa, something smaller and warmer and more ours. Ocean view, a private lanai, 2 weeks of warm wind and blue water and time that belonged to us completely. We flew out on a Saturday morning, all 5 of us, with our carry-ons and our sundresses and our laughter filling up the gate area like music. Zorana wore a hat so wide she nearly knocked someone's coffee out of their hand. Shaylin brought a journal because she said she intended to write down every beautiful thing. Phoenicia was asleep before we finished boarding. Karan made friends with the flight attendants inside of 10 minutes. And I sat by the window and watched California fall away beneath the clouds, and I felt something I had not felt in years. Light. Just completely and genuinely light. We landed in Maui as the afternoon was turning golden. The air when we stepped outside was warm and sweet, and nothing like anything I had words for. We drove to the house with the windows down, and when we pulled up and saw the ocean sitting there at the end of the yard, huge and blue and absolutely still, Shaylin put her hand over her mouth. Karan grabbed my arm. Nobody said anything for a moment. Then Zorana looked at me and said, Gerald would have loved this. And I nodded. Because, yes, he would have. He absolutely would have. On our 5th evening, we sat together on the lanai as the sun went low over the Pacific. The sky was orange and pink and purple all at once, the colors bleeding into each other the way they only do over the ocean, the kind of colors that make you feel like the world is trying to tell you something. I had brought one thing with me from home, a small photograph of Gerald from our wedding day. I had carried it in my purse the whole flight. I took it out, and I held it up toward that sky, toward those colors, toward that ocean that he had always wanted to see. And I said, out loud and quietly, We made it, Gerald. We got here. Zorana took my hand. Shaylin took my other one. Phoenicia put her arm around my shoulders. Karan leaned her head against mine. And sitting there on that lanai with those 4 women, wrapped in that golden light at the edge of the Pacific Ocean, I understood something that I think Gerald had known all along. Family is not always who you are born to. Sometimes it is who shows up, who stays, who holds your hand in the hospital, who laughs with you on the airplane, who cries with you on the lanai when the sun goes down over everything that hurt you and lights it all up. Beautiful anyway. I had spent so many years trying to earn a place at a table where I was never truly wanted. I had spent 3 years saving a love letter to Gerald, only to nearly hand it to people who did not know what love was. But love, real love, had been there the whole time, sitting right beside me, answering the phone when I called, saying yes before I had finished asking. I want anyone who has ever been made to feel like the help instead of the family to hear this. Your generosity is not your weakness. Your kindness is not a thing to be ashamed of, but it is precious, and it is yours. And you have every right in this world to decide who it belongs to. I chose, and I chose beautifully. The ocean in Maui is every shade of blue you have ever dreamed of. The sunsets last longer than you think they should. Like even the sky knows something good is happening and wants to hold on to it. And somewhere in all of that warmth and color and sound, I felt Gerald standing right there beside me, smiling, the way he always smiled when I finally did something just for myself, still smiling. To anyone who has ever poured themselves out for people who did not pour back, may you one day sit on a lanai at sunset, surrounded by the people who truly see you, and feel exactly what Daliana Murray felt that evening. You have already done more than your part. The rest belongs to you.